And something we heard multiple times, the two of us from various people, was that Jed looks at what Cleveland does fondly. He's very impressed with them. Welcome into Northside Territory, Foul Territory Network's Cubs podcast. I'm Sahadev Sharma with my partner Patrick Mooney. We're your Cubs beat writers over at The Athletic. Patrick, I'm not going to take the first 30 minutes of this podcast and talk about freshman Will Riley scoring 31 points. I'm not going to talk about Illinois basketball for 30 minutes. I promise you. I'm not going to take a major detour here and turn this into an Illini basketball podcast. Ty Rodgers transferred. It's okay. We got Will Riley. I know you have no idea what I'm talking about, but it's all right.
I rarely do, Sahadev. I rarely do.
Obviously, I'm preoccupied with Illinois basketball, but that's all right. We got Cubs stuff to talk about. Patrick, I don't know if everyone listening read the story that we published Monday morning, but it was something that you and I put a lot of work into, a lot of time into, and talked to a lot of people. As far as we don't need to get too far behind the scenes, but as far as reporting goes, I think we talked to a lot of people. We did a lot of work on this, and we've been digging in on this from the moment we heard little tidbits of it in September. So it was something that we've been excited to get out there to the public and eager to see the response. I felt like it was a solid response, and that's what we're going to talk about today and address some of the reaction and some of the details in that piece. Patrick, if you want to kind of explain what the piece was and why it's important.
Yeah, I think the headline really summed it up well, of inside the Cubs' plan to get back into the playoffs. More analytics and fewer scouts, and that sort of encompasses not just some cutbacks recently, but it tells a larger story of kind of how the Cubs have evolved and what they've become. And I know you can get into this more in a moment, but this was not a reaction to a disappointing season. It is really kind of how the Cubs have been moving in a certain direction for a long time. I think they were a little aimless there at one point after the World Series. Just Jed Hoyer redefining his baseball operations department. But sort of the bottom line is they've drastically reduced their pro scouting department. They've made some cutbacks in player development, particularly just blowing out a very experienced wing of staffers. At the same time, they're hiring in spaces like player development and R&D. And really, I guess the other component to this is every team uses a model, right? They use analytics, but the Cubs have really gone all in on this. And I think part of why we wrote this was we had heard about this, we sort of understood it, but I don't think we had accurately conveyed to our readers and Cubs fans just how the depth to which they've gone with this, and that it's right. The players they draft, the players they trade for, the free agents they signed. It is done underneath this very intricate sort of modeling system.
Right. And there's this is something that other good teams do. Like that's true. Like there's sometimes pushback on, here and there who does this and whatnot. But the reality is models are used by a lot of teams. How, to what extent and to what degree scouts are involved is the big difference, I guess, between various teams. And Ivy has been built up since Theo and Jed got here, right? Like that was one of their big things, because that system just didn't really exist for the Cubs. They were behind on that. Now, I mean, something that we did find out is Ivy's pretty good. Like compared to some other teams around the league, they have a good system. They have a good model in place. And like, as far as when players use it and players try to get information from it, from what the feedback we got, Ivy's solid. Ivy's better than some around the league. Something that I thought was interesting. We did get some people saying like, why are they just? It seems like year to year they're going from one team to the other trying to copycat. That's not happening here, right? Like to a degree, sure. Like, look, when Jed hired Carter Hawkins, there was a reason he did that, right?
Mm-hmm.
What we did a lot of reporting on that as well, the GM hiring process, and something we heard multiple times, the two of us from various people, was that Jed looks at what Cleveland does fondly. He's very impressed with them, how they develop pitching, how they're able to do these things and like basically create pitchers out of nowhere, things like that, right? Their player development was really intriguing to him. How they did that, how they built their winning teams was something he was very curious about. And Carter Hawkins comes from there, and he knows what they do. And a lot of what they do in the international space, in the amateur space, in those different spaces is where they're model heavy, right? So he knew this was coming. Like he wanted this, right? He wanted Carter to present these ideas, and he wanted to embrace this. And now this is kind of, I don't want to say it's the final form, but it's just one more big step in this evolution. What I think we heard, but like that was, so when people say it's like they're just following other teams, here's where that I disagree with that. A lot of teams, pretty much everyone we talked to outside the org said what they're doing is kind of extreme. They're not going in-person scouting above the complex league, outside of rare cases where it's like, okay, maybe a second look at a player that we need that we're contemplating trading for. But what we also found out is they didn't even do that this year. They didn't do that second look with Isaac Paredes this year. They didn't do that with Nate Pearson. So it can't be a reaction because they were already doing it this year. Like no in-person looks for guys that were pretty significant trade acquisitions. They got a look at Paredes, I guess, in June, right? When they played him. They got a look at they have a lot of background with Pearson because they almost drafted him. Paredes was obviously in the org, but still, this is out of the ordinary, right? Like when I heard that, I was a little like, whoa, that's wild. You didn't see the person, you didn't see the guy you traded for at the deadline in person the month leading up to the deadline. That just for me, as someone that's covered baseball for so long and spends so much time talking to scouts, I mean, what do we do? We're in July when we're in the press box or like in the lunchroom, right? Who do we run into all the time? Like we run into scouts because they're there scouting guys that may be traded in that game, right? Like it's like standard practice, and the Cubs are growing a more video data based, way of going about things, and that's like. I think we need to be clear that doesn't mean it's a bad thing, right? It's just different, and we'll see. We'll see what it leads to, right?
Well, I'm glad you brought up the idea of different. We'll take a quick break here and then get back into like how this is a stark contrast from how the 2016 team was built.
This episode is brought to you by Manscaped, the global leader in men's lifestyle and grooming. If you're looking for that fresh barbershop shave at home, introducing Manscaped's newest innovation, the Chairman Pro Electric Foil Shaver. Head over to manscaped.com and join the over 11 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped by using code FOUL20 for 20% off plus free shipping.
I've had so many bad razors in my past, and you only get one face. Make it count with the latest tech in face electric shavers. I'm talking Flex Adjust technology, which makes sure the blades and pivoting head adapt to the unique contours of your face and neck to hit all the angles.
There's a travel lock so you don't hear buzzing in your bag from an accidental on-button situation. And the Chairman Pro also features an LED spotlight to help you see every detail.
Get the Chairman Pro today and experience a shave that is smooth as a baby's butt. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code FOUL20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code FOUL20 at manscaped.com.
All right, Sahadev. So we go back to Theo and Jed arrive. They build this thing up. They really get it rolling. Pro scouting was a big part of that when you look at trading for Kyle Hendricks, trading for Jake Arrieta, signing John Lackey and John Lester to two very good contracts. However, I think something that came through during the course of our reporting is that within these last 10 years, the game has really shifted. The amount of information has just exploded. And when we're talking about data and video, that has clearly shaped how they want to deploy their scouts moving forward, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's about allocation of resources, right? Like it's like, how are you spending your time? Like the one valid point that I felt I heard about this was how you can scout a few players when you go to a ballpark, right? Maybe if you're a really dogged scout, you can get to like 2 ballparks in a day, 2 or 3. It maybe lower levels, they're closer and you can get to like 3, right? But it's hard to go around to various games. Like if you're doing video, I mean, think about that. You're sitting in your office or at your home and breaking down video for 8 hours. How many different players and how many different areas can you break down? Like it's more efficient. It's a more efficient way in theory, right? Of scouting guys. Of course, we're going to get pushback from scouts, and we did get pushback from scouts of the value of in-person scouting, right? There's so many things, and I think as reporters, we probably have fought this. We have fought this battle as well. The value of travel, right? Like it's like there's so many things you can see when you're at the game. People you run into and start conversations with. Like scouts do these things too. They'll start conversations with people like us that may have information. Other scouts build up those relationships. So when you pick up the phone and are able to call someone, it's because you have built up that relationship with a lot of in-person chats, right? Getting information, seeing things on the field. Like a lot of things we heard was about camera angles being not great, right? And really hard to like evaluate talent with the camera angles. So scouts like not getting a great, like I can't see the guy getting a jump from second base, his base running. I can't see how the guy reacts on defense. I only see the end of the defensive play. I want to see how the guy works before the game. I want to see how the guy interacts with his teammates. I've picked up gossip about how a guy is after the game, how a guy's doing this and that and the other, after the game out at the club or whatever it may be. That they hear things, they talk to people, they see things that they wouldn't see on video. You're going to get like, there are front office people around the game that believe that that's not good enough or not valuable enough, right? Scouts are going to push back strongly on that. But the reality is, you go look at what did we find? 7 of the 12 playoff teams have robust scouting staffs, right? 2 others, Baltimore and Houston, were hiring. There's like, I've heard different things over the past couple days too. Like others may be hiring too. We haven't confirmed that, so I don't want to say for sure. But like, this isn't like it certainly isn't the direction all teams are going right now. But I do believe the Cubs feel like that this is they're ahead of the game, and this is eventually what will be the industry standard.
Yeah, I think there are lots of different ways that a team can go about this, and our job is to put things in a broader context. So certainly the Guardians are very good at this and consistently sort of outperform expectations. Our understanding is that the Brewers under David Stearns underwent sort of a similar transition a couple years ago. We all know how good the Brewers have been. It's totally reasonable to say, well, the Cubs don't play in Milwaukee or Cleveland. And the Dodgers and Yankees, the 2 teams in this World Series, have a very robust pro scouting apparatus. They view it as non-optional. You can see where there are different wrinkles to this. Like the Rays obviously are extremely data driven, but they also have a very strong scouting staff that the numbers sort of line it up, and then their evaluators can make recommendations or try and find some hidden edges, anything to get some sort of edge.
Right. Patrick, real quickly, I have to interject there because I heard something about Tampa that I thought was fascinating.
Okay.
Not only is that true, like what you're saying, but the pro scouts, they themselves are allowed to adjust the model. They'll go, like, they'll mess with it because they know enough and they've been educated enough and they've been trained, and they'll, because of their ability to understand how to work with the model and their scouting experience, they'll say, this is off. You can't look at it like this. You can't do this. And they'll adjust it. And I think that's fascinating. I really like you want to talk about combining the two and really maximizing things. I think that's fascinating. And I thought that was, that may be something where you need the right type of scouts that are super educated in the model and are capable of doing these things. I don't know enough about how exactly that works, but I thought that was fascinating when I talked to someone about that.
Well, that cuts right to the sort of heart of this, of culture, right? And that is still sort of undefined. I think that would be a good place to pick up for our last segment here. So, Sahadev, like, what does this mean? Like, what are the Cubs trying to build? There are Cubs listeners out there following, hopefully, our coverage from the GM meetings, reading everyone at The Athletic. Like, how does this sort of influence the Cubs thinking this offseason? Like, how should we sort of view every random tweet of, Team X interested in player Y? Like, what do the Cubs want? What are they hunting right now?
Right. So that's interesting, right? Like, there's is everything dictated by a machine, a computer, right? Are they doing everything? Is Jed just being run by something else? Is the model running the Cubs? That's not how it works, right? Like, the model is going to spit out the value of the player and what it kind of strips away remember, like, I'm not sure how much of this I 100% agree with or whatever. Different people feel different ways about these things. But it strips away some of the bias that may come with scouting, right? Then again, like, some of a lot of what scouts believe is put into the model too, right? So that's not even 100% true. And it's also the model's created by a person, so there's got to be some sort of bias in there. But they're, like, ultimately, as Jed has told us, they're trying to build a sustainable winner, right? Like, that is the goal, and they believe that this is the way to do it. They're headed in that direction right now. I think something that we heard along the way that I think is important is it's not dictating strategy. It's not telling them to what it's helping them understand is, like, it's giving them, in their opinion, the least biased view of a player's value. Now they debate, like, do we think we should spend more than what the model says on Corbin Burns? I'm just throwing out a name, right? We need a pitcher more than a batter. We need this more than that, right? And they debate that. And it's like, we're at this point in our contention cycle. We're willing to spend more than the model says. We can't spend more than the model, whatever it is. Strategy is debated by and dictated by the human beings, which is Jed Hoyer, Carter Hawkins, Essen Bakari, the assistant GMs, all these guys in the front office that are high up there. They're making the decisions and figuring out who they're going to target, how much they're going to spend. But the model gives them a lot of info. It's not dictating strategy, but it is giving them they're relying on it to not make terrible decisions, right? Like, they don't want to make extreme decisions, and it kind of gives them something to kind of tether themselves to as they move forward.
Yeah, and to be clear, like no one knows if this is gonna work or not. If you can totally be optimistic if that's how you choose to view it. You can push back on this sort of quest for efficiency. I mean, the Cubs have good players. They don't have super bad contracts weighing down their books. They have a cluster of good prospects at the top of their minor league system. Like, can totally work. It's just that you see a team that finishes with 83 wins, whether it's managed by David Ross or Craig Counsell. You see how certain teams like the Padres or the Phillies have, extended their payroll to places that the Cubs really haven't, or done deals at a scale that the Cubs haven't. And you just begin to wonder, when does this emotion or urgency sort of take over, or how does that sort of manifest itself here for a team that has to win next year and could. But it's just that I think something that we've talked about a lot that you kind of saw on social media of like, this Cubs team has good players, professionals in the clubhouse. There's definitely talent. There wasn't a lot. It just felt they were sort of like there, right? Like they were, near the third wild card, kind of hanging around, not out of it. And it just felt like, to me at least, that's sort of how the team was constructed, to just sort of put out something respectable, that could help sell almost 3 million tickets to Wrigley Field, give a little bit of hope, but not overextend themselves, not jeopardize any future possibilities of winning. And I do think it's fascinating now that they have gone in this direction to see, like, how do they adapt again, right? Because there is enormous pressure on this group to not just have what they believe is a very sound process, but to produce great results.
Right. So something that we heard along the way, and I know I keep saying that, but I think it's important because we heard so many different things, and sometimes there were recurring themes, was if the model is so good, why have they just won 83 wins? Why do they have the top payroll in the NL Central and still struggle to compete in the division? I thought that was a fair point. I thought that was very fair. Some pushback that I've gotten over the past few weeks on that, I think makes sense. Ultimately, a lot of what they've done with the model has been pro acquisition, right? I don't know if they've made any awful decisions when it comes to pro acquisition over the past 2-3 years, right? Say Suzuki, Shota Imanaga,
like major.
Yeah. Dansby, I know people have issue with Dansby Swanson. He's a valuable player. Okay. And then you look at the rest of their pro acquisitions, they've been valuable players, if not impactful, as far as like much more valuable than what they gave up or what they're spending. The rest of that stuff takes a little while to catch up. Like you can't talk about the draft and know when that impacts them. You can't talk about international and say that, like, these things take years to know if it's working. Right. $240 million payroll. Listen, I like, something kind of hit me recently, and I don't like, this is just the optimistic view. I don't know if this is going to work, and I don't know if I think this has to work, right? Otherwise, it's a different front office, right? So like, they have the pressure on them that they have to deliver. But $240 million payroll with almost no young talent until impacting the team until the end of last year, right? Michael Busch, sure, but then PCA and Miguel Amaya didn't start helping the team until late. Porter Hodge didn't start helping the team until late. This year, this upcoming season, not only should you have those guys that we mentioned, all these young guys should be helping the team, and you'd like to think that it's going to be around a $240 million payroll again, right? So you have that, you have the $240 million payroll plus all the cheap talent, the cheap young good talent, That's how you build winner. That's how you win games. Like, that has been the missing ingredient over the last few years. Young talent coming up and helping the team. And it's not one or two guys. It's Matt Shaw. It's Owen Casey. It's Moises Ballesteros. It's Kevin Alcantara. It's Cade Horton. Are all those guys going to be awesome and help the team? I don't know. I won't say that's the case, right? But you add in those 5 names that I mentioned, and then Cam Smith and James Triantos. I don't know who's going to be traded. I don't know who's going to be there. I'm just saying they have a lot of young talent about to hit the majors. This is when you really say, like, $240 million payroll and young talent, that team should win. If you did this right, that team should win. So now that makes sense to me. So 83 wins the last 2 years, the model isn't working. I don't know if that's a fair criticism. I think in 3 years from now, if we're saying 75 wins, the model isn't working. That's a very fair criticism. If even a year from now, we won't be having much more discussion about Jed Hoyer and company. I think being around if they're winning 70 something games or 83 games and out of the playoffs, right? Like, it's just that they're on notice to win. But I thought that was an interesting way to frame it, and it did make sense to me, because that's, I mean, you want, like, I don't think it's fair to compare this team to Arizona, right? I don't like the dumbing down of things and, like, hey, they're going to play under these restrictions, financial restrictions. No, you're the Chicago Cubs. I don't want that. But why did Arizona make it to the playoffs last year? And make that run last year? Because they had this insane amount of young talent impacting their team. There were veterans there, but a ton of good young talent. Even when Texas won it all, Evan Carter was a huge part of that, right? Rookie. Like, there were a couple other young guys who, like, my brain isn't recalling them, but, like, even the ones that spend big, you need some young guys, right? It's just the reality of baseball, and it's how it works nowadays. And I think that's something that we can't completely ignore.
And I think, sort of to wrap up, I think what the Cubs have now, because they've been so deliberate and disciplined, is to be in on, we said this before, just about anyone other than Juan Soto. Like, Corbin Burns is obviously going to have a huge number. He'll get a huge number. Maybe it's winds up being not quite as enormous as, everyone thinks during the GM meetings. And as players linger on the market, like a Cody Bellinger, or there's Blake Snell last year, the Cubs are going to be in position to strike for almost anything they need. And that, even taking away the $30 million that's going towards Bellinger for next year, there's still a huge chunk of money available for Major League payroll this year. You go out and get a frontline starter. Maybe the model says one thing about relievers, but maybe you do, as you suggest, kind of read the room a little bit, right? And recognize what you need to kind of close out games, add another catcher, and then that way, yeah, you do have just a steady supply of depth and young players impacting your ball club in lots of different ways over a very long season.
Yeah, when you talk about reading the room, I think that's something that is important to remember. Ultimately, these are humans making the decisions, right? As much as the model is being relied upon and used and things like that. And scouts may feel their opinions aren't as valued as much. Others feel like, hey, that's what the model is for. We're inputting your information into the model. And that's how it's being used. It's not like this verbal debate as much until afterwards, after here's the value, and now let's debate these things over. And that's where the emotion that may be missing in other ways comes into play when you're having these debates about how you no, we have to get a high leverage reliever. No, we have to go a little bit out of our comfort zone this time and do this. And you have someone fighting for that. Like those debates still happen, and hopefully they're happening in earnest with the Cubs, right? You don't want everyone being like, well, the model said this, and they're all in agreement. If that's happening, I think they will fail, right? Like, you don't want everyone agreeing and everyone being like, yep, this is exactly what we're doing, and we're all in agreement, no debate. Like if that's happening, then it's not an effective front office. And from my understanding, that's certainly not the way it works. I look, Patrick, I think ultimately, like I think you and I, when we heard all this, we were a little taken aback, and it was a little different than what we're used to hearing, right? I mean, who do we talk to the most? It's going to be scouts. But after reporting it out and coming through everything, I think we've heard a lot of different ways about how this may play out. And ultimately, I'm just like, I'm very curious to see what happens. I'm like, we know a little bit more about this front office now, how things work. They haven't been good enough, and result wise the last 2 years. So the pressure's on. We need to see results. How do they execute it this offseason, right? You don't get the results this offseason. We won't know until a year from now. But obviously a huge offseason, a lot of important decisions being made. And we understand a little bit more about the decision making. So let's see how it plays out. But it's obviously going to be very interesting to follow. This week, we'll next episode, we'll dive into a little bit more about the strategy of it all and what they may do. Obviously, there was big news with Cody Bellinger opting in, and that changes a lot of things. Who they go after, how they upgrade the offense, I think is a fascinating topic. We'll tackle next episode. Will be part of a lot of what we talk about next episode, and probably over the next few months. So this is Northside Territory. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Make sure to subscribe, rate, and review. Would love it if you subscribe to the YouTube page and subscribe to The Athletic. Hey, Patrick, we're profitable, man, so keep subscribing.
Subscribe no matter what.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening, everyone. Take care.